Welcome to Presidential Fight Club, the show that answers the question, if all 44 presidents fought each other one-on-one, who would win? Hosted by two history professors who have too much time on their hands, Scott Rank and James Early. Hey everyone, welcome to the next fight in our second round of the Northeast Regional. We have a returning fighter, Chester A. Arthur, who is victorious over Silent Cal, Calvin Coolidge, and he is facing off against John F. Kennedy, our first 20th century president and probably our most famous so far. James, tell us about JFK. What does he bring to the fight, and why do you think that he could win?
All right. Well, John F. Kennedy is an interesting case here. You could argue this two different ways. I'll start by saying that Kennedy, as most of our listeners know, he was one of the most sickly presidents we ever had, probably the most sickly president. Had horrible health his entire life. He had Addison's disease. He had back problems. He had digestion issues and stomach issues. And I saw a documentary series on him one time, and they said that he was actually so sick that 4 times in his early life he was given the Catholic last rites. So, which is only given if they believe you're just about to die. So he was very near death many, many times as a young man. He was very brave, and he was very tough, kind of like Theodore Roosevelt. He used physical exercise of many types to overcome, or at least to try to overcome his health issues. He was not as successful as Roosevelt was, and his issues were much worse than Roosevelt's. But Kennedy, Kennedy lifted weights and he did all kinds of things. He was dying to get into the military when World War II broke out, but the military wouldn't take him. And his dad, while he was working out trying to pass the physicals, his dad crossed a few palms with silver. He had quite a bit of that and got him into the military. And Kennedy was given a desk job at first, but he wasn't satisfied with that. And so you can see he definitely had a fighting spirit. John F. Kennedy wanted to get out in the fight. He wanted to go out and really participate firsthand in the war. And so he got assigned as the commander of a PT boat, a patrol torpedo boat. And there was so he was the commander, and he had maybe a dozen, 15 men or so. I forget exactly how many it was. It wasn't very many. It was a very small boat, fast boat, but small. And one time his boat, he was on the boat with his men, and he looks up and they see this Japanese destroyer coming full blast straight at them. And the destroyer actually collided. It rammed Kennedy's boat and pretty much ripped it in two. And of course, some of Kennedy's men were killed and everybody else ended up in the water. And Kennedy was one of the ones in the water. And he actually towed one of his crewmen to safety. The man was holding onto a rope, and Kennedy, even with his back problems, his back was killing him. And, he'd just been through a traumatic accident like all the men. But Kennedy towed this man to safety with a rope, holding it in his teeth while he's swimming. So if that's not tough and courageous, I don't know what is. When you think about Kennedy in a fight like this, you can look at it from the standpoint of how he overcame his problems and how he had a tough fighting spirit. We can think later in life when he was president, how he stood up to the Soviets in the Cuban Missile Crisis. He did not back down from a fight. In fact, he wanted to get into the fight. But you could also look at it from the standpoint of, well, what if his back gives out, or what if he took many, many types of medicines. He took dozens of pills every day just to function. Sometimes he had to wear a back brace. So which Kennedy is going to show up, the sick one or the tough one? And is he going to have his medicine? We don't know, but he's going to bring it. He's definitely going to bring it.
Well, the mental game is really important here, especially with the person that Kennedy is going up against, Chester A. Arthur. He first squared off against Calvin Coolidge, and we agreed that he won partially due to the mental game. Also, Coolidge just wasn't much of a fighter at all, partially due to his size. Arthur was 6'2". He was about 220 or 230 pounds, which is a very big guy at the time. And with his background, he's president from 1881 to 1885. He is, for a while, part of the corrupt political machine of New York. He's working at the New York Customs House and making money off of government tariffs. So that's how he's able to amass the revenue that he does. And he has a lot of enormous influence on public projects, but even on the presidential level of who becomes president. So what Arthur does is have the ability to get other people around him to do things, this sort of charismatic talent of making other people think it was their idea, almost kind of like this Huck Finn thing where you're getting other people to whitewash the fence. And especially going against an opponent like Kennedy, where his health could really be a wild card, having that mental focus is something that whatever his health might not be the best, Arthur is large, but he's also quite fat. So I don't know if he'll really have the endurance. I doubt he could swim for several miles, towing someone in his teeth the way that Kennedy could. So that's a strike against him, definitely. Never encountered that situation.
It would mess up his fancy clothes.
Yeah, exactly. One aspect is that Arthur was in the military as a brigadier general. Now, that sounds a little bit misleading because we talked about Franklin Pierce in a previous episode that he was appointed, and a lot of time, if you were I don't want to say aristocrat because there's not really that in America, but as an upper class person, you could get that sort of officer's commission without having experience. So he has some experience. He's doing different things such as serving in the New York militia. He's an engineer-in-chief on the governor's staff. He declined an appointment as a commander of the 9th New York Voluntary Infantry Regiment. So I don't think he saw any combat experience, but he was around soldiers, so maybe by osmosis he learns a few things. I guess that's one argument there we can see for all the different chicken hawk presidents out there, and we have many. Okay, yeah. But James, what is the result of this fight?
Before I announce the result, I have to say Arthur's military position was strictly a desk job. He was the quartermaster for the state of New York, but he saw a lot of soldiers.
Yeah, so he knew how to provision.
I forgot to give you John F. Kennedy's stats too. He was 6'0", 6 foot even, and of course, if anybody's ever seen a photo of John F. Kennedy when he was a young man, he was rail thin, like just looked like a scarecrow. Now, when he was 35, he was a little bit, he'd filled out a little bit, but he still was extremely skinny. But the fight goes to Kennedy. The voters chose John F. Kennedy because of his fighting spirit and his courage in overcoming the physical illnesses. They felt like that would cancel out the pain that he's obviously feeling the entire time he's fighting. And he's quick, and he could probably. And he had military experience. He served in the Navy for several years. And so, he would have had some kind of combat training. I don't know if he would have learned a martial art necessarily. Probably not. But he would have learned a few basics on how to punch and how to defend himself. So, yeah, Kennedy takes it pretty overwhelmingly.
Yeah, I think after World War I, when there was all this trench warfare, the U.S. military shifts to providing more hand-to-hand combat skills to soldiers. And they're not just relying on bayonet charges or firing mortars like the Civil War. But yeah, Kennedy, I think in this fight, it clearly goes to him, and we'll have more to say about him in the future. But one other factor to piggyback on what you said about mental toughness, his father, Joe Kennedy, who built the family wealth on bootlegging, taught his sons the Kennedy standards, which doesn't refer to ethics, but to winning. So win at all costs, never cry. And his mental toughness, I think, is more conducive to winning a fight than Arthur's toughness is. Arthur's toughness is getting other people to do your work for you, which is great for a politician, but in a one-on-one fight, I think Kennedy's toughness, which enabled him to swim for those several miles and to really commit his last dying breath to something, is what allows him to win here.
Right. Arthur didn't have any other people to help him in this situation.
Okay. Well, this was a really interesting fight. And the next fight are two presidents, modern presidents, Franklin Roosevelt versus Donald Trump. Let's see what happens with that one. Thanks for listening to Presidential Fight Club. If you'd like to download your own printable bracket sheets for each regional tournament so you can guess how the tournament will go, check out presidentialfightclub.com. We'd appreciate it if you could rate and review us on Apple Podcasts as well. Thanks for listening, and may you fight with the stamina of Teddy Roosevelt, the courage of George Washington, and the reach of Abraham Lincoln.